I didn't find out from my GM and James Jones or my new owner in Matashibia. I found out from my son via text when I landed in Teterboro. Like, my son sent me a text, and that's how I found out I was traded. That would really make me angry. But I also got news for everybody. No one gives a damn. Chris Paul, by the time his earnings are done, has made close to over $400 million, one of the highest paid players in NBA history.
But on the other hand, they weren't polite about the way they went about this one thing.
The way,
I'll take the $400 million.
That's the way business works, Max.
Yeah. But what about those who would say it's not either or? You can both have a very lucrative business and also do things in a way that's, respectful.
Of course. I mean, look, I would have appreciated a call from my owner or my general manager that I have a long-standing relationship with in James Jones.
Why would they do it this way, Jay?
I don't know what the reasoning is behind that.
Might it have something to do with you want to get everything in place because still it's several days before the deal gets done before you present it to Chris Paul? Because if he's not happy with it, you don't want him blowing it up or something? Well,
I mean, look, there's nothing to be said. Like, I wouldn't tell Chris Paul if I were James Jones 2 days leading into it. I wouldn't say anything. I would be honest with him, though, about the situation. Be like, look, I would like for you here, but we're also trying to win a championship, so that might take us down different paths if we're being frank and transparent with each other.
In an interview with the New York Times, Chris Paul said the Phoenix Suns owner Matt Ishibia and Ishibia's friend Isaiah Thomas, who we've had on the show, of course, friend of the show.
I mean, Zeke
had on every show I've ever done practically on radio. Isaiah has a way of becoming the trusted basketball mind to owners who are looking for answers, I find, right? So anyway, that Ishibia and Isaiah Thomas may have, quote, wanted to go in a different direction.
By the way, Max, in the New York Times article, he said their names combined 5 times. It just wasn't one time he said it. He kept referencing Matt and Isaiah. Now, look, Zeke is like a big brother to me.
Yeah, Zeke, come on.
All-time favorite players.
Zeke needs to jump back on the line.
I agree with the move.
Yeah.
I agree with the move.
Right.
CP3, if that is the case.
He's 38 years old, and he's never healthy in the playoffs.
If Zeke did give that advice to Matt, or I'm sure Matt have received advice from his brother Justin and James Jones and this collective of people around the organization, it's the right move. The execution of the move, though, I disagree with. I would have done it differently. But
James Harden is on the wrong side of 30 and getting up there. Chris Paul is almost 40. There was a star player in Bradley Beal who's 29, 30, who's still in his prime. And as Kendrick Perkins said, sometimes you don't need to overthink it. You have 3 guys at this level. Your team you should be able to fill out the roster in such a way that you are very, very good. I understand the move. Speaking of Chris Paul, he's going to join Harry and Fitz. Fitz and Harry is the name of the show, Jay. Fitz and Harry, not Harry and Fitz like you just said. At 1:15 p.m.
My voice sounds so different than yours. I
don't know why you said it.
The last 2 minutes.
How did the Bradley Beal get done? That's the question.
There it is.
I love it. Where's the best landing spot for Chris Paul? For real, we're going to get into that, KJ.
The tires there. Draymond has such a unique skill set. There's some teams where it wouldn't make sense. And the other thing is, he opted out of a $27 million contract. He did that for a reason. He's going to want to be well compensated. He is not a guy who is going to make your team a championship team. He is going to take a team that's very good and probably try to elevate it because of some of the stuff he does. One of the things that you learn after covering the NBA for years is teams that make it deep into the playoffs, they typically have players who are smart and tough. I'm telling you, you go back and look at the teams in the finals over the decades, you're going to find players in those teams who are smart and tough. Draymond Green epitomizes that. He is the smart, tough, symbol of the Warriors and all their titles. And so if you have a team that really is, getting close, to bring in a player of that nature would be huge. The problem is that most of those teams don't have the enormous amount of cap space that you would need. So I think a lot of teams would like him, but where he fits, where it makes sense in his career, it's probably a pretty short list.
So, Wendy, who would be on that pretty short list?
I mean, I think I would not be surprised if Detroit calls him, not because they're close, but his Michigan ties, and they have a bunch of salary cap space, and I don't know how close they're gonna finish. What else they have going. A place where he would be absolutely amazing is Memphis. I think he would be a godsend for Memphis, even though they have issues with each other. Memphis doesn't have appreciable cap space, so it's not really a discussion. But that's the type of team that makes sense, a type of team where it's possible is Detroit. So you see the delta there that I'm talking about. But at the end of the day, guys, I think he's going to stay a Warrior. Exactly. I mean, I wouldn't guarantee it because, you got to hash out the money. And I don't even think people necessarily – do you guys understand the amount of money that it's costing the Warriors to keep this team together?
Yeah, it's nuts. But hey, Windy, that's what I mean. Like, if he – in the NBA, especially with the new CBA, you got to rob Peter to pay Paul. So does this mean – if he's most likely to re-sign with Golden State and he opted out of $27.5 million this year, that Clay is not going to remain on the team? Because if you have to re-sign Clay if he's looking for, he did average 20 this year, whatever. He's not what he used to be, but so far, if you have to re-sign Clay to a large contract and you're bringing in Dre presumably at something around 27.5, but for multiple seasons, can you afford Klay Thompson, or does this signal that they're going to move on from Klay?
So, Max, you've hit on it. I'm glad you're bringing this up because, to me, if you're talking about Draymond Green, you have to also talk about Klay Thompson. So, if you go back and look at last summer, the Warriors got a deal done with Andrew Wiggins, and that contract extension included a $9 million pay cut. Wiggins is taking a $9 million pay cut from where he was last year to this year coming up. For the Warriors to keep those guys together, to keep that core together, I don't see how they're going to be able to do it unless they can get Draymond and Klay to consider taking pay cuts. And so Draymond would opt out of 27, maybe take a reduction, and they would give him some years where he could get his guarantee up. I don't see how they're going to do it any other way. Klay is going into the last year of his deal at $43 million. I mean, I don't want to speak for Joe Lacob. I don't know for sure, but I can do the math. I just don't see how it works going forward with what the realities of it are. So, now somebody who looks at their roster can say, well, then they shouldn't have paid Jordan Poole. And Jordan Poole coming on a new max contract this year, $30 million, is really causing all this stress. I would agree with that. That if they could find a way to trade Jordan Poole, it wouldn't surprise me. But I don't know if that's in the offing. Right now, as they're negotiating this, I don't see how they keep this team together unless one or both of them takes a real pay cut, a meaningful pay cut. And if they don't, maybe Draymond is willing to do that. And if he does, then I think we'll see what happens with Klay. But the amount of money is just staggering. Just on Draymond's contract alone, they're going to face about $176 million in luxury tax.
Oh my goodness.
176. And obviously you could take any piece of money out of there and attach it to that because luxury tax is a graduated scale. But this is not just a passing reference to money. This is, insane money. Draymond represents a $200 million figure on their books because you figure that he was signed for $27 million and he costs $176 in tax. So that's, you think it's not meaningful. He takes a few $1 million less. It's really meaningful, especially going forward.
Wendy, we have about 30 seconds left to go, but I am curious, how likely is it that you think Dame stays in Portland?
So I don't have a good feel for that, Jay, because in the last day or two, the Blazers are kind of sending out signals in teams that they're talking with that they may intend to keep that number 3 pick and draft with it because, certainly they've been offered some trade packages. It doesn't seem like they're in love with them. And Dame is on the record as saying he doesn't want to play with young players. He wants veteran help now. And I've gone back and checked if Dame still feels that way. And the answer that I received was a forceful yes. And so if the Blazers, it doesn't have to be the number 3 pick, I guess. I don't want to make it sound like it's all on that. But if the Blazers don't move that number 3 pick, which is their best asset, and they draft Scoot Henderson or Brandon Miller and say this is where we're going forward, I can't predict what Dame will do in the following days.
You imagine Scoot Henderson replaces Dame on that franchise, and then they flip Dame. And even from the point of view of a GM, it gives you more runway. I just put myself in the GM's position. A lot of interesting stuff coming up.
I would say real quick, Max,
yeah.
I don't see a trade that they can really elevate them.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.